By the time Vivien had turned my stolen ranch into the foundation of her criminal empire, I already controlled the mineral rights buried beneath every mansion she'd built.
Oh.
But let me rewind. Imagine this. I'm dodging mortar in Eastern Europe, serving my country when I get a call that freezes my blood. Some HOA tyrant named Vivien had legally sold my grandfather's ranch, 1,500 acres of prime American land. In our family since 1892, the same soil where my Purple Heart grandfather was laid to rest. Gone dumped for pennies on the dollar while I was bleeding for freedom overseas. I came home to the sound of gravel crunching under surveyor boots, watching strangers hammer stakes into my family's cemetery. Vivien thought she'd gutted a broken veteran who couldn't fight back. What she didn't know was that my grandfather had left me one last weapon buried in those 1960s documents, legal ownership of the ground beneath 50 luxury homes worth a combined $47 million. So let me ask you, what would you do if your inheritance was ripped out from under you? This could happen to anyone, anywhere in America. My name is Staff Sergeant Ezra Thornfield, third-generation rancher. 18 months just spent keeping the peace in Eastern Europe. While I was dodging bullets and missing my grandfather's funeral, an HOA predator circled my land like a vulture. Thornfield Ranch, 1,500 acres of rolling pasture, crystal clear lake and hills as old as time. My grandfather carved this place from nothing after World War II with his GI Bill and Purple Heart pension. Every fence post set by his calloused hands. Every barn beam cut from our own timber. This wasn't just property. It was blood, sweat, and legacy. Ranch bordered Willowweir Estates' 50 lakeside mansions where trust fund kids and tech execs paid $200,000, $500,000 for the privilege of living near the country. These people never worked a real day in their lives, yet they whined about the smell of cattle and roosters at dawn. When I finally pulled into my driveway after the flight from Germany, expecting to see my pastures, I was greeted by the harsh smell of surveyor paint, marking century-old oaks like death warrants. Orange-sold signs pierced the ground like daggers, clipboards, stakes, diesel fumes, and crushed roses from my grandfather's garden. 800 acres gone. It's allegedly sold to Willowweir Hit Show for $2.3 million. Robbery $2,875 per acre. For land worth $8 grand, my bank account showed $247. The other 700 acres slapped with development restrictions no one could explain. But the wound that cut deepest, they fenced off my family cemetery. The rattle of chain link around my grandfather's fresh grave still haunts me. That's when I met Vivien Ashworth, HOA president from hell. 52, drives a white G-Wagon. Worth more than a house, measures grass with a ruler, and files HOA complaints like it's her hobby. 47 in the past year alone. She stood in my driveway smirking, holding papers. Military housing allowance doesn't cover property taxes, does it, soldier boy? She sneered, shoving forged delinquency documents at me. My bank records proved they were lies. Your grandfather should have planned better, she added, sliding designer sunglasses up her face. Sunglasses worth more than my combat pay. This is what happens when military families think they're above responsibility. I stood there in uniform, fresh off 18 months, defending her freedom, while this parasite lectured me on patriotism. Leave or I'll have you arrested for trespassing, she threatened, dialing her sheriff buddy. Here was my nightmare. $247 left after divorce fees. The only local lawyer? Her golfing partner? It's a county clerk's office losing my property records. My bank swearing no record of my automatic tax payments. And strangers hammering stakes around my grandfather's grave. I made a promise. Right then, Vivien had no idea who she'd tangled with. And something about my grandfather's knowing smile and old photos told me. He'd left me more than just land. Military training teaches patience, strategy, weak points. She was about to learn why you never steal from a combat veteran's family legacy. But Vivien wasn't finished. Within 48 hours, she filed a restraining order, claiming I'd threatened her with military-style violence. Total fabrication. The judge rubber-stamped it without hearing me out. Suddenly, I was banned from half my county. Her next move? Military-grade cameras aimed at my ranch, tracking my every step like I was a terrorist. Then came the neighborhood app posts. Aggressive veteran behavior concerning PTSD episodes. She was crafting a character assassination, painting me as the monster next door. Her masterpiece. Community safety meetings about undesirable elements. Her perfume couldn't mask the stench of her bigotry. But here's what Vivien underestimated. Military intelligence doesn't vanish when you hang up the uniform. While she staged her social games, I played chess. And I remembered what Grandpa always said, when politicians lie. The truth hides in paperwork they hope you'll never find. I spent my last $47 on gas, driving 200 miles to the state archives. Dusty basement files gave me gold more valuable than Vivien's diamonds. Original 1892 land grants. Grandpa's Purple Heart citations, and the smoking gun proof my taxes were paid in full. Every cent filed, stamped, and accounted for. Payments Vivien swore never existed, redirected to the wrong account by a one-digit clerical error. My divorce attorney had once warned me, corrupt officials create fake delinquencies, swoop in cheap, then flip the land. But owners have redemption rights. Military families get even stronger protections under federal law. And guess who approved this emergency sale? The county assessor who just bought a $340,000 house at 47 Willier Drive. But Vivien's greed became her undoing. She rushed the sale through 30 days before the legal waiting period. It's too arrogant to even make it technically legal. That mistake screamed fraud louder than a siren. Armed with this evidence, I thought justice would come. Instead, Vivien doubled down, cornered like a rattlesnake. She even hired a private investigator to dig through my divorce records and deployment history. Anything that could discredit me, they used. Local news outlets ran stories painting me as a troubled veteran who couldn't adjust to civilian authority. Convenient considering the editor's wife lived at 23 Willier Drive. Small town connections, right? Then came the harassment campaign. Noise complaints every time I started my tractor before sunrise, sheriff's deputies ticketing me for disturbing the peace when I ran cattle across my own pasture, citations for unauthorized construction when I repaired my own fence. It was like living under a dictatorship, except the tyrant wore yoga pants and drove a G-Wagon. Vivien's crown jewel of cruelty came at 3 in the morning. I woke to find Surveya stakes rammed through my grandfather's rose garden, 60 years of heritage blooms destroyed in minutes. Security footage showed the HOA groundskeeper carrying out orders that could have only come from her. Ow. When I confronted, her response was ice cold. Those roses were encroaching on community property. We have standards. Standing in the crushed petals, diesel fumes thick in the air, I realized this wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. Vivien thrived on crushing people who couldn't fight back. She had chosen the wrong veteran to push around. Her next move was predictable, an $800 an hour law firm out of the capital, a type of place with marble lobbies and rates that make you feel broke just walking inside. Within days, I was slapped, with a lawsuit accusing me of aggressive trespassing and $500,000 in damages. Her masterstroke, claiming my cattle had trespassed onto HOA property, which was actually my stolen land. The legal filing even described my grandfather's prized Angus bulls as dangerous livestock deliberately weaponized against residents. I had to read it 3 times before I stopped laughing. According to Vivien's universe, cows were assault weapons. But 2 can play at the lawyer game. I called the Military Legal Aid Society. On the other end, a crusty old JAG officer listened patiently before saying in a gravelly voice, "Son, this stinks worse than a week-old salmon. Let me make some calls." Those calls connected me with Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney in the neighboring state who specialized in HOA abuse cases. She worked pro bono for veterans. Her own father had lost a farm to the same type of corruption. When we met, she pulled out a thick folder and said words that made me grin. Most HOAs are technically illegal. Yours might be one of them. Together, we dug into Willowmere's corporate status. The discovery was priceless. The HOA had failed to properly incorporate with the state. For 3 years, they'd been masquerading as a government body, collecting fees and enforcing rules with no legal authority. They were a paper tiger. Sarah explained that homeowners could challenge every action, even demand refunds of years of fees if the HOA wasn't legally registered. But the real kicker came next. While combing through records, we found proof that Vivien personally profited from my land sale. Her landscaping company, Ashworth Aesthetics, had received a $180,000 beautification contract the very same month.
Ow.
She'd literally stolen my inheritance and then paid herself out of the proceeds. It was like watching a bank robber send the bank an invoice for consulting. Sarah filed a motion to dismiss all HOA actions on the grounds of their illegal status. The courtroom was packed the day Vivien's $800 per hour attorney had to explain why his client was effectively an outlaw organization masquerading as a homeowners association. Watching him sweat was better than cable TV. But Vivien wasn't going down quietly. She staged an emergency HOA meeting to retroactively approve everything and rush through new paperwork. Only 12 out of 50 homeowners showed up. Most were sick of her antics. At nearly midnight, with a skeleton crew of her loyalists, she forced through votes that normally required a full majority. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. 2 days later, another lawsuit landed on my doorstep. This time she wanted $1.2 million in punitive damages, claiming my legal challenges were harassment and threatening to seize my remaining 700 acres. She had more nerve than a rookie skydiver, but her case was weaker than soggy cardboard. Reading those papers on my porch, my grandfather's wind chimes clinking in the breeze, I remembered his old advice: when your enemy is making mistakes, don't interrupt them. Vivien had just made a fatal one. Her paranoia escalated to legendary levels. Having failed to bury me in lawsuits, she turned her wrath on Willowmere's homeowners. Christmas lights left up past January 2nd, $200 fine, tomatoes planted in a backyard, $500 penalty for unauthorized agriculture. She was fining people for breathing. Her masterpiece of tyranny came when she tried to foreclose on elderly Margaret Clearwater's home, over $45 in late fees. Margaret, a retired school teacher widowed by cancer, was barely holding herself together. Vivien's response? Grief doesn't excuse financial irresponsibility. That was the breaking point. The residents finally woke up. Margaret launched a Facebook group, Willowmere Trufflers, that grew from 5 members to 43 in 2 weeks. The horror stories they posted could fill a Stephen King novel. One of them, Navy veteran Tom Bridgewater, whose immaculate lawn earned him 3 violations for excessive uniformity, became my unlikely ally. We met at the hardware store while both buying security cameras. He leaned over and muttered, "That woman's crazier than a soup sandwich, son. What can we do to stop her?" Started hosting Know Your Rights workshops at the library. Sharing everything Sarah and I uncovered. 8 neighbors came to the first, 22 to the second. By the third, it was standing room only. That's when Margaret dropped a bombshell. While cleaning her late husband's things, she found the original 1965 HOA covenants buried in the attic. Her husband had served on the development committee and saved everything. The brittle, yellowed papers contained the line that made my heart soar. The bylaws explicitly prohibited any land acquisition beyond the original 50-lot plat. Vivien's purchase of my ranch wasn't just corrupt. It was flat out illegal. It wasn't just that Vivien had broken state law, she had also violated the very documents that created the HOA in the first place. Sarah called it ultra vires. When someone acts so far outside their legal authority that it's as absurd as a small-town mayor declaring war on Canada. In legal terms, those actions aren't just invalid, they're treated as if they never happened. Vivien had been playing a rigged game of chess, moving pieces illegally, while everyone else thought they were still playing checkers, but Margaret wasn't done landing blows. Tom had been digging into the HOA's pool maintenance fund, and what he uncovered was jaw-dropping: $89,000 missing over 3 years. The money had funneled straight into Vivien's landscaping company, Ashworth Aesthetics, for services either never performed or shamelessly overbilled. The pool told the real story. Green algae thick enough to walk across, broken filters, diving, boards held together by duct tape and wishful thinking. The stench of stagnant water hit you from 50 feet away. Yet somehow Vivien's company had billed residents $30,000 the previous year for premium maintenance. When this was brought up at the next community meeting, Vivien panicked. Brought in 2 private security guards to keep order. Scheduled the vote during working hours when most neighbors couldn't attend. And threatened lawsuits against anyone spreading lies about HOA finances. But watching the meeting unfold was like watching a dictatorship collapse in real time. Standing at the podium, her voice grew higher and more brittle with every challenge.
Ow.
While furious homeowners shouted questions she couldn't answer, even the hired guards shifted nervously, realizing they were protecting a petty tyrant from her own community. This is what happens when outside agitators infiltrate our peaceful neighborhood, Vivien barked, pointing straight at me. Some people can't accept that property changed hands legally. Margaret stood up then, her teacher's voice slicing through the chaos with calm authority. Vivien, I've lived here longer than you've been alive. This isn't about outsiders. It's about a board member stealing from her neighbors. The applause thundered through the community center, rattling the windows. Watching Vivien's composure crack as her empire began to crumble was sweeter than my grandmother's apple pie cooling on the windowsill. Then came the phone call that changed everything. At 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, Sarah's voice shook with excitement. Ezra, sit down. I found something that makes Vivien's worst nightmare look like a vacation. She had been digging through the original 1960s development records and stumbled on a legal technicality big enough to topple empires. When Willoware Estates was first built, the original landowner, my grandfather's neighbor, had only sold the surface rights. He had kept everything below: mineral rights, subsurface access, and, most critically, foundation support rights. And here was the kicker. In 1963, my grandfather had quietly bought those subsurface rights for $500. What he purchased without even realizing it was the literal foundation beneath every single home in Willoware Estates. All 50 luxury houses technically sat on property that belonged to me. Sarah laid it out simply. Imagine you own a house, but someone else owns the ground your basement sits in. That's what's happened here. I'd even learned about these kinds of cases in an Army geology course in Colorado. Surface and mineral rights are legally separate, and sometimes homeowners discover too late they don't own the land under their own foundation. The implications hit me like a convoy. At full speed, I could legally demand the removal of all 50 homes sitting on my subsurface. Property relocation costs estimated between $12 and $15 million. Or, the homeowners could buy those rights from me at fair market value, $45 million for the development. When Sarah broke the news to Vivien's attorneys, their lead counsel called an emergency meeting that alone cost them $25,000 in billable hours. Their conclusion was devastating. My claim was airtight. No insurance company would touch a dispute of this magnitude. The very ground beneath Willoware belonged to me, the veteran Vivien had tried to erase, and then I saw the fallout. My binoculars, I watched moving trucks swarm driveways as panicked families packed up. Real estate agents circled like vultures. Property values plunging overnight as word spread through mortgage channels that title insurance wouldn't cover homes built on land they didn't own. The footage of Vivien's own fountain pen clattering against her marble conference table captured by the security cameras she had installed herself became the defining sound of her downfall. Her $1.2 million mansion was now worth only what I decided to charge for the dirt beneath it. That evening, Margaret called, laughter spilling through the receiver. Ezra, honey, she's been driving in circles around the neighborhood for hours. Like a lost dog. I think she's coming apart at the seams. Tom was blunter. That woman thought she was playing chess with a country boy. Turns out you were playing three-dimensional chess while she was still figuring out the rules of checkers. Now, I held the nuclear option. I could evict every homeowner in Willoware and reduce 50 families to collateral damage. Or I could negotiate a settlement that would restore my land, with enough compensation to make Vivien's theft the most expensive miscalculation in county history. What Vivien never understood was that military training doesn't teach you to maximize destruction, it teaches you to achieve objectives with minimal collateral damage. My fight was with her, not the innocent families duped by her schemes. And now, she stood at the edge of financial ruin. Staring down criminal prosecution, her kingdom of lies was built on ground she never owned. The foundation of her power, literally, was mine. Justice wasn't just coming. It was already standing on my land, in combat boots, armed with legal documents sharp enough to cut her empire to pieces. But when you're holding a nuclear weapon, you don't just push the button, you plan the strike. Sarah assembled a dream team of legal warriors. A military property rights attorney undefeated in veterans' cases. A forensic accountant who could follow dirty money through more twists than a labyrinth. A real estate expert whose testimony had swayed even Supreme Court judges. Our war room was my grandfather's old study. Papers and maps spread across every inch like a battlefield operation. The smell of leather, ink, and black coffee filled the room as we plotted our three-phase campaign. Exposure, negotiation, and if necessary, total enforcement. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, our forensic accountant, laid out the numbers with brutal precision. Vivien embezzled $340,000 over 4 years, she said, sliding charts across the oak table. Pool repairs, landscaping, bogus security contracts. She's been running a one-woman mafia under the banner of HOA leadership. The evidence was overwhelming. Original mineral deeds from 1963, forensic proof of forged tax documents with mismatched inks, HOA ledgers showing years of self-dealing, and time-stamped videos of her unauthorized land grabs. But our ace in the hole wasn't just paper, was Margaret. Her bridge club had quietly turned into an intelligence network. And as it turns out, elderly women share more secrets than any spy agency in the world. After 3 glasses of wine, Margaret's intelligence network delivered another bombshell. Vivien had a Swiss bank account holding exactly $2.3 million, the same amount she'd paid for my stolen property. Meanwhile, Tom had orchestrated something remarkable. A veteran support convoy from 4 counties was assembling. Men and women who had bled for the Constitution now rallying to witness justice. The roar of motorcycles and the rumble of pickup trucks would send one clear message: America still protects her protectors. Our media strategy was just as precise. I'd learned in the Army that psychological warfare and public opinion battles were one and the same. We prepared press packets drawing sharp contrasts. My grandfather's Bronze Star service against Vivien's theft of a veteran's land. Social media campaigns showcased the family cemetery trapped behind HOA fences. Anonymous tips went out to investigative journalists about her corruption. Sarah prepared settlement strategies, like a general planning battlefield contingency. Total victory, fair compromise, or scorched earth. We'll give them 3 choices, she explained. Return everything with damages, buy the subsurface rights at market value, or face evacuation and prosecution. Then came our masterpiece: insurance. Homeowner policies excluded property rights disputes, and title insurers refused to defend homes built on someone else's land. That meant Vivien's neighbors stood to lose everything if forced to move foundations. Panic was already spreading. But the final dagger came from environmental engineers. HOA construction had contaminated the lake due to faulty drainage. Violation gave us federal jurisdiction and the prospect of EPA charges. Margaret, through her Bridge Club spy ring, secured the final piece of intelligence. Vivien was planning to flee to Switzerland. Her exit plan involved liquidating assets, transferring funds offshore, and vanishing before charges stuck. But she'd underestimated the speed of federal authorities once stolen military property was involved. Momentum surged. Margaret's homeowner, Revolt, had 38 of 50 residents demanding Vivien's removal. Tom's recall petition overshot the threshold by 15 signatures. Local media ran with our leaked documents, and the state attorney general's office had launched a fraud investigation. Sitting in my grandfather's chair that night, surrounded by documents that would restore our family honor, I felt his presence in the room. The lamplight glinting off his dog tags whispered the truth. Justice delayed isn't justice denied, it's justice perfected.
Tomorrow,
Vivien would finally learn why you never steal from a veteran's family. But desperation makes tyrants dangerous. When legal warfare failed, Vivien turned to sabotage. My water well, which had provided clean spring water for 3 generations, suddenly cracked and drained overnight. Repairs would cost $12,000. Records showed the accident was caused by a contractor who regularly worked for Ashworth Aesthetics. Then came anonymous reports to county environmental officials accusing my cattle operation of contaminating the lake with military chemicals. The irony was staggering. The very woman whose illegal construction polluted the watershed was accusing me. Health inspectors arrived in force, but the soil tested cleaner than a hospital operating room. Her smear campaign escalated. Rumors spread about my supposed PTSD outbursts. At the diner, the owner whose mortgage Vivien's bank held refused me service. The hardware clerk stared like I was about to explode. I was being cast as a ticking time bomb in my own town. Then came her most insulting move yet: bribery. She cornered me in the courthouse parking lot, Mercedes humming behind her, and offered $500,000 cash to relocate somewhere. It's more suitable for a veteran with your challenges. The way she said it, like I was broken, defective, a danger, made my blood boil. Think about it, soldier, she said. Veterans with trauma need quiet environments. Suburban life may be too stimulating. What she didn't know was that I'd been recording every interaction since day one. Her bribe, threats, and demeaning words were preserved in crystal clear audio, ready for prosecutors. But her darkest move came next. Professional vandals, not teenagers, but processed systematically. Cut my perimeter fencing one night while I was at a VA appointment. At 3:47 a.m., I got the call every rancher dread. One of my grandfather's prized Angus cows had been hit by a semi on Route 42, killed instantly. The financial blow was heavy, but the emotional cost was worse. That cow descended from the original, herd Grandpa raised after the war. Before I could grieve, Vivien struck again, calling the sheriff before the animal's body was cold, spinning the story to local media. By morning, headlines screamed: troubled veterans' negligence causes highway accident. They painted me as unstable, reckless, danger to society, no mention of sabotage. Margaret's Bridge Club then uncovered Vivien's nuclear option, filing emergency bankruptcy, shifting her mansion to a Cayman Islands shell company, and crying. Financial hardship caused by frivolous lawsuits. Meanwhile, my farm equipment was sabotaged, brake lines cut, hydraulic systems damaged, even my grandfather's memorial oak poisoned with industrial herbicide. Each act of vandalism was documented by Sarah, building a conspiracy case, brick by brick. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit froze her. Swiss accounts, after reviewing our evidence, standing beneath my grandfather's oak tree, watching century-old leaves curl and brown from poison, I realized Vivien had crossed the final line. Cut brake lines could have killed me. She wasn't just a white-collar thief anymore. She'd become a violent criminal bound for maximum security. And with every shattered fence, poisoned tree, and slanderous headline, her case for prison only grew stronger. The night was alive with headlights and engines, but this time, I was ready. Justice was no longer a dream, it was marching forward in combat boots. Vivien's desperation had reached psychotic levels once bankruptcy failed her. Federal authorities froze her offshore accounts before she could whisper Cayman Islands. And her amateur attempts at hiding assets looked like child's play compared to real financial criminals. With every option closing, she turned to her last weapon: total character assassination through manufactured evidence. The setup was as vicious as it was simple. She hired a professional actor who resembled me just enough for grainy security cameras. On a crowded Friday night at Murphy's Tavern, this fake Ezra picked fights, threatened patrons, and shouted about killing HOA board members before stumbling into the parking lot. Hours later, edited footage went viral painting me as a dangerous veteran making terroristic threats. Her next masterpiece came hidden in my truck. During a routine traffic stop, a sheriff's deputy whose daughter conveniently attended private school on an anonymous Ashworth Aesthetics scholarship discovered an open bourbon bottle under my passenger seat. Suddenly, I faced DUI charges despite being stone sober. With half a dozen witnesses to prove where I'd been all day, then came the restraining order, written like a horror novel. Vivien swore under oath that I had threatened her with military style, violence, boasting tactical knowledge that made me a ticking time bomb. She claimed I described how a veteran could neutralize multiple targets before police even arrived. Pure fiction. But the judge bought it, expanding the order to cover all of Willower Estates. Half my county was now off limits, and driving past. My own land became grounds for arrest. That's when our counterintelligence operation uncovered her ultimate plan. Margaret's Bridge Club had outdone the CIA once again, proving that gossip and wine work better than wiretaps. Vivien was preparing to dissolve the HOA, liquidate assets, and vanish into Switzerland within 72 hours. She'd already purchased the Zurich ticket using the Community Pool Maintenance Fund. The audacity was staggering. But while she plotted her escape, we were tightening the noose. Sarah coordinated with federal prosecutors to time everything down to the minute. The FBI would issue arrest warrants exactly 1 hour before Vivien's flight. Her bank accounts were frozen, her passport flagged, her escape routes monitored. Public opinion had turned against her completely, fueled by our press leaks. Headlines screamed, "War hero's family desecrated by suburban dictator." She went. Vivien faced hostile stares. Meanwhile, Tom's veteran convoy exploded in size. Word had spread across 4 states. A veteran's family legacy was under attack. Combat veterans, Purple Heart recipients, Gold Star families, they all came to stand as witnesses. The roar of their motorcycles would soon echo like freedom's battle hymn. Cornered, Ivan made her last desperate play. She offered to sell back 400 acres of my stolen land. For $1.2 million, the same amount she'd paid for all 800, her compromise. Demanded I drop every lawsuit and criminal charge while she kept half my inheritance. Then came the threat. Accept, or I'll burn the community center to the ground before I let you take everything from me. Margaret sealed her fate with one final coup. At their last bridge game, after 3 glasses of wine, Vivien bragged about how she forged the tax documents herself, laughing about fooling stupid government clerks. Margaret had recorded everything in crystal clear audio. Every word, every incriminating boast, captured forever. The trap was set. Morrow's community meeting would be her downfall. She thought she'd deliver her ultimatum, but instead, 200 witnesses, the FBI, and the press would watch her empire collapse. That night, the sound of car doors echoed as the veteran convoy arrived early, forming a perimeter around the community center like a forward operating base at 6 o'clock sharp. The parking lot looked like a staging ground for Battle 30 motorcycles and pickups circling the center. Flags snapping in the breeze, veterans standing as an honor guard. Inside, the air was electric. 200 residents filled the seats. Media cameras locked into place. Deputies covered the exits not for crowd control, but to stop one woman from fleeing. Then came Vivien fashionably late, stepping from her white Mercedes like royalty. Her $800 an hour lawyer trailed behind, his briefcase worth more than most mortgages. She strutted inside in designer clothes, her face painted with arrogance. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice polished but hollow. "I've called this meeting to resolve an unfortunate misunderstanding with our neighbor, Mr. Thornfield. Despite his military service, which we all respect, certain legal complexities require adult supervision." The condescension was suffocating. She continued with her generous settlement. I could repurchase 400 acres for $1.2 million. And in exchange, all lawsuits and criminal actions would vanish. That's when I stood. The room hushed. 30 veterans straightened, leather creaking, like an orchestra warming up. My voice carried calm authority forged in battle. "Vivien," I said, "before we discuss money, let's discuss ownership." I nodded to Sarah. The projector flared to life, filling the wall with high-definition scans of the 1963 mineral rights documents bearing my grandfather's signature and the county clerk's seal. These documents, I declared, prove I own the subsurface rights beneath every mansion in Willower Estates. Every basement, every foundation, every septic system sits on property that belongs to me. The gasps that followed were thunderous. The room went silent, the air sucked out like a vacuum. Patricia Wells, a real estate agent whose home sat squarely on my property, muttered loud enough for the back row, "Oh my God." The current market value for these subsurface rights is $47 million, I announced, watching Vivien's complexion drain faster than her offshore accounts. Or, all 50 homes can be relocated for about $15 million. Her attorney's face twisted with panic as he snapped his Italian leather briefcase shut. The sound echoing through the stunned crowd. He clearly wanted no part of the disaster about to unfold, but I wasn't finished. Since we're on the topic of theft, I gestured to Margaret, who rose like a key witness. With trembling hands, she held up her smartphone. "I have a recording of Vivien confessing to forging tax documents and stealing veteran property. Would you like to hear it?" Her voice, loosened by too much wine, played across the speakers. Vivien bragged about how simple it had been to fool stupid government clerks. Every word nailed her coffin shut. That's when FBI agent Rodriguez stepped forward, badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Vivien Ashworth, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, and violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act." The community center erupted like a stadium after a last-second touchdown. Cameras flashed. Vivien shrieked about communist conspiracies and ungrateful neighbors as Rodriguez calmly read her rights. "This is persecution," she screamed while Sheriff Mitchell added his own charges: money laundering, conspiracy, and about 15 others we'll discuss downtown. The sound of cuffs clicking shut was sweeter than church bells after deployment, led away in shackles. Her designer heels tapping against the linoleum, Vivien passed rows of veterans standing at attention. They weren't saluting her, they were saluting justice. From the back, Tom's voice thundered. "That's how America handles its enemies." The ovation lasted 3 minutes. Outside, motorcycles roared to life, echoing like freedom's thunder across Willower. Justice moved fast. Vivien drew 5 years in federal prison and $2.1 million in restitution. Every penny recovered. The corrupt county assessor who'd helped her lost his pension, served 2 years, and was banned from public service forever. Watching these parasites finally pay up felt better than Christmas morning after a year in the desert. 6 months later, our 1,500 acres were back in my family's name. Margaret became HOA president, Tom the treasurer. And together, they ran it with radical transparency, open books, monthly reports, and a rule requiring unanimous approval for any expense over $500. Neighbors helping neighbors, not rulers squeezing residents. When it came to the 50 homeowners, I chose fairness over vengeance. Instead of bankrupting them, I sold subsurface rights at 20% below market value, $8.2 million over 10 years, interest-free. A veteran's discount for those fooled by crooks. The community thrived. Margaret ran the HOA with competence and grace. Tom launched monthly veteran support groups, and our workshops expanded statewide to teach people how to protect themselves from HOA corruption. Patricia Kane's reporting won state awards and even sparked reforms, mandatory audits, and background checks for HOA boards, but the crown jewel was the Thornfield Veterans Scholarship Fund. Seeded with $500,000 from the restitution, it's helped 47 children of deployed service members attend college in just 5 years, some joining the military themselves, others becoming veterans' rights lawyers. Each year, our gala brings neighbors together at the ranch, honoring service and sacrifice with food, stories, and laughter under the same stars my grandfather once gazed at. The case became a legal landmark. Sarah Chen now teaches it nationwide. The Thornfield Doctrine, protecting military families from predatory HOAs. Some victories are legal, others are personal. I married Janet Morrison, the librarian who'd uncovered those critical property documents in the fight's early days. Together, we adopted 2 children of a fallen Marine, giving them the home and legacy their father. Couldn't our ranch now runs cattle and doubles as a retreat for veterans seeking peace? Last Tuesday, the phone rang. Marine Sergeant from California, desperate to protect his family farm from eminent domain abuse. His voice carried the same desperation I once felt. "Sir," he said, "I heard what you did in Willower. Can you help me fight these bastards?" I looked up at the wall of thank you letters from veterans and Gold Star families, felt my grandfather's proud spirit in the room, and said, "Son, pack your documents. Get ready for war. Justice isn't finished yet." Children's laughter drifted in from the rose garden, mixing with the sound of my grandfather's wind chimes. Some battles end in surrender. Others end in victories so complete they light the way for everyone else. This wasn't just David defeating Goliath. Yes, was teaching every David how to build his own slingshot?